Hello everyone! It's time again to talk about what else I saw last month that I didn't review. Everything's a little strange right now, obviously. There are plans I've had to postpone and movies I couldn't watch because I couldn't take them out of the library. I've had to be flexible and make do with what I had access to. Which, has turned out okay. In April, almost everything I watched was on a streaming service. Amazon Prime we already had, my brother had a month-long Netflix trial, so we watched a couple things there, and we recently started using the Watch TCM app, which you can get free access to through your cable provider. Turner Classic Movies puts movies up there that they have recently aired on television. The period of availability for these movies varies. Some of them they're only up for a couple days, some of them are up for a whole month, so you've got to pay attention, but I have been able to see quite a bit of stuff that I would have missed otherwise, so that's been good. Now, as you can see, I've got quite a few movies to talk about, so I'll try to keep this moving. Here, without further ado, is what else I saw in April. Movie number 1 I can only give myself partial credit for, 1965's Red Beard. Turner Classic Movies celebrated what would have been Toshiro Mifune's 100th birthday April 1st by playing a whole bunch of his films. I caught this one on TV, and even though I missed the setup, I found it an engrossing drama, not difficult to get into. Mifune plays a doctor in a 19th century Japanese village who clashes with a younger doctor, played by Yuzo Kayama, fresh out of med school in Nagasaki. Mifune's character is ever a surprise, tough, direct, sometimes fierce, but also kind, patient, and wise. I learned afterward that this film was the last of the many collaborations between director Akira Kurosawa and Mifune. Supposedly, tensions between them became so heated over Kurosawa's prolonged production process that they ended their partnership on bad terms, never working together again and not reconciling until years later. Quick side note, to tell the truth, I've kind of avoided Akira Kurosawa's movies. I saw segments of Dreams on TV when I was a little kid, and I didn't like it. And a few years ago, I saw Throne of Blood, starring Mifune, and I didn't like that either. So even though Kurosawa and Mifune are a big deal in the film world, I didn't have a positive first impression of either, although Throne of Blood did have striking visuals. But I'm open to changing my mind. I really liked Mifune in Hell in the Pacific, which I saw a couple months ago. That's not a Kurosawa movie. So I'm interested in seeing more of him, and I've learned that he and Kurosawa did a number of highly regarded contemporary non-samurai films, which sound really interesting. Red Beard is one of the films I meant to check out sometime, and I was glad I caught it because I liked it. I enjoyed Kurosawa's direction, which had some fascinating elements to it, and I enjoyed Mifune's performance, especially his more understated moments. So stay tuned for more Kurosawa Mifune reviews. Movie number 2 is 1954's Beachhead, a World War II film in which 4 Marines are given a dangerous mission to meet up with a French radio contact who may not be what he says. This movie looks fantastic, filmed in rich, crystal-clear Technicolor. The scenario is tense, and the acting from the 2 leads, Tony Curtis and Frank Lovejoy, is good, so halfway through I was thinking, this is good stuff, why haven't I heard of it? Why doesn't it have a higher IMDb score? And then the Frenchman and his daughter entered the picture, and the story nosedived as our 2 leads suddenly got hit by the stupid train. I know I'm mixing my metaphors there, but I don't like love triangles in my combat movies, and this one was especially ridiculous and nonsensical. I did enjoy the movie otherwise, but that development took it down a couple notches. Movie number 3 is a quirky mystery from Warner Brothers that feels like it could have been a British film, 1941's Shadows on the Stairs. It's set almost entirely in an English boarding house where there's something sketchy going on, and then dead bodies start appearing, and the house's occupants all become suspects. The relatively small cast stars Frida Inniscort, Paul Kavanagh, and Heather Angel, among others, including sexy Turhan Bey in his first screen appearance. It's an interesting little flick with atmosphere and chuckles mixed together, and a fun twist at the end. It wasn't the spooky film I'd expected, it was more amusing than scary, but that was fine. Movie number 4 is a film from 1939, Pacific Liner, in which a cholera outbreak among the engineers and firemen of a cruise ship threatens both the health and safety of the ignorant passengers and the status quo of the hierarchy in the belly of the ship. It stars Victor McLaglen and Chester Morris. I don't particularly like either of them, but McLaglen's bluster became endearing, and Morris was much better here than in the last movie I saw him in. Their characters oppose each other on just about every point possible, plus they like the same woman, the nurse played by Wendy Barry. This was a good film, with supporting performances from Alan Hale and Barry Fitzgerald, who did not overstay their welcome. I'm not the biggest fan of them either. It's not a well-known outbreak movie by any means, but it was a decent story with some excellent photography. Movie number 5 is the one sort of trendy movie I saw last month, 2019's Angel Has Fallen, the third and last of the, what do they call it, the Fallen trilogy? The series where Gerard Butler is a Secret Service agent. Unquestionably, this one was my favorite of the three. Butler's character, Mike Banning, is dealing with physical and mental issues, which worsen when there's an assassination attempt on the president, played by Morgan Freeman, which Banning, the lone surviving agent, is accused of setting up. While there were certain things I was able to call, there were many times I felt like, okay, now this is gonna happen. Oh, I was totally wrong. I also loved the dynamic between Banning and his father, a Vietnam vet turned mountain man, played perfectly by Nick Nolte, who I never would have expected to see playing Gerard Butler's dad, but it works. I loved the humor in their scenes, which I didn't think took away from the intensity and seriousness of the situation at all. I really enjoyed this one. Movie number 6 is the 1949 Japanese film Stray Dog, directed by Akira Kurosawa and starring Toshiro Mifune. I said to stay tuned. In this noirish crime film, Mifune plays a rookie cop whose gun is stolen on a bus. His search to recover it leads him through the seedy world of post-war poverty, and he learns to his horror and shame that a desperate thief-turned-murderer is using his gun to kill. Mifune is joined by another Kurosawa favorite, Takashi Shimura, who plays a veteran cop who leads the hunt for the murderer. There's a nice mentor dynamic here, the elder counseling the younger. It's a good film, although I thought it was a bit lengthy at times. What stuck out to me most was how thoroughly Kurosawa conveyed the inescapable summer heat. Everybody's sweating and wilting and trying to find respite from the relentless sun. It really made an impression on me, as did the depiction of desperation and cutthroat opportunism in the congested city streets. Movie number 7 is another one I saw on my brother's Netflix, 2018's How It Ends. This is an end-of-the-world movie, which, frankly, I wasn't in the mood for, and maybe that's why I didn't like it. Theo James, who I find really dull, stars as a guy stuck in Chicago trying to get back to his pregnant fiancée on the West Coast, accompanied by his father-in-law-to-be, played by Forrest Whitaker, with whom he has a frosty relationship. On the way, they're beset by criminals and crazy people who are up to no good. This film is dreary and slow with bursts of intense action. The cause of the apocalypse is kept vague, and I bet the writers were afraid to commit to anything, so they thought they'd play it safe and commit to nothing, giving the movie a horribly lame excuse for an ending, which, as far as I was concerned, put the final nail in the coffin. Movie number 8 is 1950's Winchester 73, an Anthony Mann-directed top-notch western in which Jimmy Stewart goes after the man who killed his father and stole his gun. That's funny, there's 2 movies on this list in which the protagonist is looking for his stolen gun. In this case, the weapon is a fancy-schmancy Winchester rifle won in a shooting contest hosted by Wyatt Earp himself. I really liked this one. It does have a couple weak spots. There's a poker game early on that went on for a bit and made my attention wane. Also, Rock Hudson, before he was famous, shows up as an Indian chief, which wasn't believable at all. But other than that, it's a very good film with strong performances all around. Shelley Winters and Dan Duryea co-star. Duryea is especially memorable. He's crazy and wicked, but kinda likable. Movie number 9 is His Kind of Woman from 1951, one of 2 popular Jane Russell and Robert Mitchum pairings, in which Mitchum is hired to fly down to a resort in Mexico and wait. For what, he doesn't know, but the resort is chock full of oddballs and sketchy characters. What the bad guys want with Mitchum was quite surprising, so I won't spoil it. This Jon Favreau-directed film was a Howard Hughes production. It features saucy dialogue from Jane Russell, who sings a couple nightclub numbers and wears a variety of eye-catching Howard Greer gowns, while Mitchum is one cool cat. I feel like I've talked about a Robert Mitchum movie every month this year. Is that true? The big draw for me, though, was the supporting performance from Vincent Price, playing a hammy actor who's also a bit of a heel, who ends up coming to save the day, spouting Shakespeare and wearing a cape for no sensible reason except that capes are cool. He was a ton of fun and stole the film in the last act. Movie number 10 is the last thing we watched on Netflix. My brother said, hey, you should watch this one before I cancel my subscription. It's 2016's 93 Days, which is about the 2014 Ebola outbreak in Lagos, Nigeria, which claimed the lives of a group of medical workers. I thought this was a good film, and it was especially interesting to see this perspective after reading Richard Preston's book Crisis in the Red Zone a few months ago. The movie does take a surprisingly discreet, tasteful approach to the disease, which made it feel like the horrors of Ebola had been watered down somewhat, but it was still an effective, emotional take on a true story. There are some really negative reviews on IMDb.com, but I thought it was fine, not terribly overacted or horribly low budget like they claim. I almost wonder if we saw the same movie. Movie number 11 is a noirish mystery directed by Jack Conway, 1942's Crossroads, in which William Powell stars as a diplomat who gets blackmailed for a crime he committed years ago before he had an episode of amnesia. This is a very different kind of performance from William Powell, tense, fearful, even desperate. Hedy Lamarr co-stars as Powell's wife, who suspects her husband is in trouble but doesn't let on. She looks amazing, and it's hard to glance away whenever she's on screen, but I suppose that goes without saying. Her noteworthy outfits were designed by Robert Calick. The good supporting cast includes Basil Rathbone, playing a cad, what a surprise, Claire Trevor, who I always like, Felix Bressert, ever a treat, and Margaret Wycherley, who was very fun. There's some really nice photography in this one, too, especially scenes shot in darkness and on wet lamplit streets. Movie number 12 is 1958's The Gunrunners. I didn't know it at first, but I soon figured out that this is another adaptation of the Hemingway story that To Have and Have Not and The Breaking Point are based on. Considering the differences between the three films, though, I'd say one of them at least is really different from the source material. Audie Murphy stars this time as the innocent captain of a fishing boat who's so hard-pressed for money to support his family that he agrees to charter a man and his female companion on an illicit trip to Cuba, where the situation quickly becomes dangerous. Even though I had a pretty good idea where the story was headed, I still enjoyed the movie. It's a very good one for Audie Murphy fans. His protagonist is likable and cheerful, so you pull for him to toughen up and do the right thing when he has to. He's also absolutely smitten with his wife, played by Patricia Owens, which is charming. It may not be Bogey and Bacall's chemistry, but they do have some spicy read-between-the-lines dialogue. The other woman, for whom Murphy's character spares barely a second glance, is played by Swedish model Gita Hall, who's beautiful but kind of cold. Eddie Albert plays the oh-so-charming villain brilliantly, and Everett Sloane shines as Murphy's alcoholic friend and first mate. It's a good movie, even if you are familiar with the more famous versions. Movie number 13 is a murder mystery from 1947, The Unsuspected. I saw the beginning of this once a few years ago, and kind of dismissed it as a Laura ripoff, but it isn't really. There are a lot of threads in this plot, but the central focus is the much-publicized hunt for the murderer, led by the victim's employer, popular host of a true crime radio show. This character is played by Claude Rains, who was absolutely delicious here, attractive, urbane, and duplicitous. Rains is joined by Joan Caulfield as his wide-eyed ward back from the dead. Audrey Totter is his catty niece, who wears a variety of incredible Milo Anderson gowns and Eugene Joseph costume jewelry. Constance Bennett plays a worldly wise secretary, and Hurd Hatfield plays Totter's morose alcoholic husband. The only weak link in the cast was Ted North, credited as Michael North, as the man who surfaces claiming to be the presumed dead ward's husband, who is technically, I guess, the film's hero. Unfortunately, I thought he was kind of milquetoast. The Unsuspected isn't a flawless film. I think it runs a little long, and the plot feels kind of drawn out and complicated. But Reigns is great, and I loved Michael Curtiz's direction. Photography, camera work, costumes, jewelry, set design were all impressive. It's an engaging film with twists and turns and a whole lot to look at, and to listen to, of course, every time Claude Rains speaks. Movie number 14 is You Can't Get Away with Murder, a morality tale from 1939. It's that year again in which a kid allows his sister's fiancé to take the rap for a murder committed by his gangster friend. Humphrey Bogart is despicable as the hardened gangster, a role he played many times before his career took a turn for the better in the early 40s. You absolutely hate his selfish character, but there's no denying he was really good at playing the part. It's a story about internal anguish mostly, as the main character, Billy Hallop, one of the dead-end kids, struggles with the fear and perverse loyalty that holds him back from telling the truth. We've got another movie with a strong supporting cast, featuring a moving performance from Gail Page as the sister, and especially from Henry Travers as Pop, an ailing prison librarian. I really loved Travers here. There are also brief appearances from some other familiar faces, Frank Capra alumni, as well as a couple scenes featuring Eddie Anderson, also known as Rochester from The Jack Benny Show. I recognized his voice right away. This film was a bit frustrating and a bit sentimental, but it was good. As we draw to the end here, we close the list as we opened it with Akira Kurosawa and Toshiro Mifune. The Watch TCM app had these two famous popular samurai movies up all month long, and even though I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in watching them, I felt it would be silly to waste the opportunity when they were right there. So movie number 15 is 1961's Yojimbo, in which Mifune stars as a wandering samurai who walks into the middle of a local feud and ends up playing the two sides against each other. This is the movie of which Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars is a remake. I just saw that movie for the first time a couple months ago, and I was surprised to see how much of a remake it is, right down to small details. No wonder Akira Kurosawa won the lawsuit against Sergio Leone. That doesn't take away from my enjoyment of A Fistful of Dollars, though. And, I've heard snarky comments like, all the great American westerns are just rip-offs of Japanese samurai films. But Kurosawa himself said that his filmmaking was partly inspired by American cinema, especially John Ford westerns. So it all goes hand in hand. As I said before, the samurai subgenre doesn't really grab me, but I did enjoy this. It helps that the sword fight scenes themselves are surprisingly quick. Like its remake, this film has quirky supporting characters, black comedy, a high body count, and an appealing yet elusive main character. I get the Mifune appeal now. His character here projects quiet charisma and a commanding presence, even as he's relaxed and very informal, always eating, always scratching himself. Even when Mifune's in the background of a scene, you keep an eye on him just in case, so you don't miss some subtle reaction or change in his expression. There's also a very famous shot in this movie involving an extreme amount of wind and dust, and I recognized it right away. This is possibly the best of many gorgeously framed shots in the film. As a side note, if I can toot my own horn a little bit here, within a minute of the film starting, I said, hey, this music reminds me of the score from Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Is it the same composer? And it is! Bonus points for me! Before he did that music, in 1974, Masaru Sato composed this jazzy, Henry Mancini-inspired score, which definitely is a highlight of the film. So having watched that, of course, the next day we had to watch movie number 16, what ended up being the sequel to Yojimbo, released the following year, 1962's Sanjuro. Mifune's character, known as Sanjuro, returns to aid 9 young men who are making such a mess of their attempts to address political corruption that they end up endangering their uncle's life. Sanjuro's patience is tested by their recklessness, requiring every ounce of his forbearance and mercy. Mifune is again fun to watch, with his light comic touch, his swagger, his rolling shoulders, and his facial expressions. And yes, he wipes out a lot of bad guys single-handedly. Among the cast is his future co-star for Redbeard, as well as several Godzilla alumni, Takeshi Shimura of course, but also Godzilla fan favorites Akihiko Hirata and Akira Kubo. Of the two films, Yojimbo and Sanjuro, I think this one is more fun, especially because of Mifune's reactions to the people he's reluctantly volunteered to help, but I did find it a little confusing. It jumps right into the situation, and I could have used a little more explanation of what was going on. I was able to understand everything on a basic level, certainly, but I'd have a little trouble explaining it to someone else without doing some research on historical context and cultural background. Like Yojimbo, this film has a high body count, punctuated with a shocking end scene, which I believe was censored out of the original American release. In both films, the number one antagonist is played by Tatsuya Nakadai. I found a video in which Nakadai reflects on filming that last scene, which was apparently unplanned and unrehearsed. They did it in one take, and the actors standing in the background didn't know if what they saw was real or fake, and were suitably horrified. Knowing that makes me appreciate the scene even more. Between the two of them, which one did I like better? I don't know, that's tough. It's more like, well, I liked this better over here, but I liked that better over there. I don't really have a clear favorite, but I did like both of them better than I expected to. And now I'm looking forward to seeing the other Kurosawa films on my list. Eventually. Not immediately, but at some point in the future. That covers all the movies that I saw in April. I did also watch The Sitter, the 1977 short film that When a Stranger Calls is based on. Some of you may know that a few years ago I reviewed both versions of that movie. I feel the best part of When a Stranger Calls, the 1979 original, is the first act, with the babysitter and the creepy phone calls. The rest of the movie is more of a so-so psychological drama, and I could do without it. This short film, however, is just that excellent first act. It's a little more antiquated and made with a lower budget, but still chillingly effective, especially if you get freaked out being home alone and you don't like it when the phone rings. And one last thing, my parents and I have been watching episodes of The Prisoner, the 1967 British show created by and starring Patrick McGoohan. It's pretty weird, definitely not what I'd expected. We're almost halfway through, and I still don't know if I like it or if it's too surreal for me. We'll see how I feel at the end of it. I hope you enjoyed this month's collection. The movies I mentioned will be listed in the description below, and please share your thoughts on any of them in the comments if you like. I look forward to reading them, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!